Alright, in this video I want to talk a little bit about making particle diagrams. Now you can do particle diagrams on paper, you can also do particle diagrams on a digital platform like a Google Slide or in Google Docs. Today I'm going to show you on Google Slides how you might make a particle diagram. Now before you start, a couple of things to consider. First, you always want to have some kind of a border for your diagram to show kind of the part of the diagram that you're zooming in on. You also want to think about what needs to be shown in your particle diagram. What are you trying to communicate in this diagram? You have to think about that ahead of time. Remember, you also want to show particles, and you got to think about this ahead of time. Are you trying to show particles as individual atoms or as whole molecules, or maybe even as both? Sometimes you're just focusing in on a certain aspect. Do you need to show motion of particles? Do you need to show bonding? Also, make sure you always include a label or a key. And so thinking about these things ahead of time will help you before you start making your diagram. So I'm going to do an example in this video. In my example, I chose that I want to show that air is a mixture of multiple types of particles. And for my example, I want to show that oxygen is an important part of the mixture. Oxygen is O2, and it makes up about 20% of the air. So those are some of the things that I'm trying to communicate in my drawing. So to start with, I'm going to use this Google Slide as kind of my drawing template. The Google Slides is actually really good to draw on. It has this feature right here in the toolbar, and if you don't see a toolbar, it's probably because the toolbar is hidden. So you want to make sure that you can see this shapes icon. And when you click on that shapes icon, you get different options here. And you get all different kinds of shapes that you can choose from. The first thing that I want to do is create like a border or a space to do my drawing in. Now, anytime you make a shape, Google, the default is always that the shape is filled in. So you'll notice that the shape is like gray. I like to make the border not filled in. So I go ahead and change that to transparent. I go to fill color and make transparent. The other thing is I want to label this before I get too far into it. So I want to make sure that I'm including a text box, and you can just click anywhere that you want that text box to show up, and you can say what your drawing is. My drawing is going to be air. Now, I said that I want to show air is made up of more than one component, and I was kind of focusing in on oxygen as an important part of that. And so I'm going to choose the shapes here, and I mentioned that oxygen is diatomic, so I'm going to use little circles to represent atoms of oxygen. Also, in the previous video, you might have heard me say that there is some color coding convention, and so oxygen is normally red, and that doesn't mean that oxygen is literally red. It just means that whenever we show oxygen atoms, we typically show them as red circles or red balls. And the other nice thing about doing drawings digitally is it's really easy to duplicate something that you have already drawn. So instead of going through that whole process of adding a shape again and changing the color, you can just click on the shape so that it's highlighted, and then use Command C for copy, and if you hit Command V for paste, then you automatically get another one. So now this is oxygen, O2. You may also want to, like, as you're making your diagram, include a key. So you can add a text box and say that here, this is going to be my key. And again, the nice thing about using a digital platform is that it's really easy to duplicate things. So if I select these shapes, and by the way, you can select both circles at the same time if you hold down the Shift button while you click on them. And then again, Command C is copy, Command V is paste. And now I've got a duplicate, which I can drag over to where I'm going to make my key. And I can add a text box to label what that is. And adjust things. Text boxes can be kind of annoying because sometimes they don't go where you want, and they sometimes are larger than what you need. So you got to play around with things a little bit. Now, oxygen's just one component of air, so I maybe want to use some different shapes to show some of the other components of air. And this is where you can kind of be creative. You can choose whatever shape you want for different particles as long as you label things. I might use this diamond shape to represent another component of air, and I'm going to include that in my key. Let's say this diamond shape is carbon dioxide. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to my particle diagram and then update my key. One other important component of air is nitrogen gas. So I can come over here and choose yet another shape. Maybe I want to do a hexagon for nitrogen, and I can draw that shape in mine. Also, I like to add colors because sometimes if two things are the same color, it's hard to tell them apart. So you can always change the color of a shape by selecting it, and then come up here where it says fill color, and you have lots of options. It just so happens that nitrogen is blue on the color coding conventions, and so I'm going to make nitrogen blue, and I'm going to include nitrogen in my key then as well. And you can slide things around so that they line up the way that you like them to. Make it nice and neat. And again, text boxes can be kind of annoying sometimes because you have to fiddle with things a bit to get them to be just right. So now that I have all my components in there, and the next thing that I wanted to communicate in this drawing was that about 20% of the air is oxygen. And so if I only have 3 particles, I'm not conveying or showing that 20% thing. And so I'm going to have to add some more particles to this in order to represent that 20%. Now, I don't want to have 100 particles in here because that would be too many. So I'm just going to decide that my particle diagram is going to contain 10 particles. And if I'm showing that oxygen's 20%, that means that 2 out of 10 must be oxygen. So I'm going to go ahead and copy my oxygen and paste it somewhere else in my particle diagram. And then I need to show a total of 10 particles. And I'm going to go ahead, and another fun fact for you is that most of the air is nitrogen. So I'm going to go ahead and make the other remaining particles nitrogen. And so I'm just going to take and copy and paste nitrogen and kind of randomly spread it around in here so that I have a total of 10 particles in my particle diagram. I need one more. And there it is. So this would be an example of what I would say is a good particle diagram. I've represented what I was aiming to represent. I don't have too many particles. I have a key over here, and again, you might have to fiddle with things to get them to line up just right, but the more you do this, the better you'll get at it. Like anything, practice it makes perfect. And let your teacher know if you have questions, and good luck. We'll have some practice for you in this lesson.